Hi, everyone. I'm She-Roze, founder of the She-Roze Collective, and it is my pleasure to come back again this year and partner up with Power Street Theater for this year's session of Power Talks. So we're going to kick off this year by interviewing Asaki Kuruma. She is someone I'm so excited to get to meet. She is originally from Japan, and she is a multidisciplinary artist. She's been working professionally in the Philly area, working with several of the theaters out there for over a decade now. Let's see, as a performer, as a deviser, as a stage manager, as administrator, as a cultural consultant, an educator. But lately, it seems like her passion has been costume design. So I'm so excited to have a chance to get to know her a little bit better. So Asaki, if you don't mind, tell our friends today a little bit more about yourself. Like, tell us about, who is Asaki Kuruma as an artist and as a woman, and what are some of the key moments in life experiences that have kind of shaped who you are, today in this moment?
Oh my, that's going to be a long story. Hi. For old-time bus readers, Asaki, you're familiar with me. I was in a couple of shows with the Street, namely the first rendition of the Minority Lamb back in 2014, I believe, and a couple others. Then I kind of switched my focus from performing to costume designing. I have done backstage work pretty much my entire career in a theater, because when I first came here, I attended Temple University. I was a theater major, and then we were all supposed to do some kind of a backstage work as a theater major. And there was like a list of things that you can do. And I was just reading, I was like, okay, what is this? What is this? And because I didn't really understand or spoke English at the time, I was like, what is the thing that I can do and probably not gonna hurt anyone or kill anyone if I don't understand, like somebody said duck, So I chose costume construction. I knew how to sew since when I was pretty little, thanks to my mother. And so I went downstairs to the costume shop and was like, hi, I was told to be here for a contract. And they're like, oh my gosh, she doesn't even speak English. So yeah, so that's like a kind of a beginning of it. Done quite a few backstage things. Then at the time I was working as a costume supervisor slash like second ASM for this small theater company in Philly, when one of the directors says, so we're doing this like a little event thing. We need a couple of the actors to be costumed. You know the stock, you have style. Could you like style them? Like, could you pull some stuff and like style those people? And I was like, yeah, sure. And after that, one thing led another, and I'm a fully blown costume designer now. Very unexpected, but I love what I do. Seems like I'm doing okay with it. So aside from like freelancing, designing, I also again work as a costume shop manager for one of the universities in Philadelphia, and I take care of the costume for theater and dance. They have pretty big pretty big dance concerts in the winter and the spring. So I just do the management side and the design side, and also mentoring my students, especially for this spring for the first time designing for the dance. So yeah, that's where I am right now, doing everything around the costume.
I love it. So pretty much what you're telling me is that this all started because you have style. Is like,
Oh,
I love that. So and I know that I sent you some of the questions earlier, but of course, like, I think that like the beauty of these conversations where we get to dive in a little bit deeper. So knowing that what seems to have sparked your style or your career is your style, tell us a little bit about your style, and maybe what are some of the roots that influenced, your own unique style that seems to have kind of paved the way for a really budding career.
Well, ooh, that's a tough question. I love fashion, but I wasn't never really interested in being like a fashion design. That seems a little, yeah, that seems a little like unpractical in a way. And so I think my style is pretty on the chic side. I love bright colors. I love like little costume jokes
Ah,
inserted that for people to like don't even see on stage. Like sometimes like, oh, so this person is going to China, so she has like a panda socks,
mm,
something like that. Or like what else? Like at the beginning I tried to insert like a little animal motif every single time, but that just didn't keep on going. So that kind of died down. Yeah, it's just like a little things. Yeah. Yeah, chic, eclectic. And
mm-hmm,
I also try to see what kind of shape will fit this person the most. Because,
mm-hmm,
of course, we all have different body types,
mm,
body shapes. This person is more a little bit longer on the bodice. Okay, this shape looks better. Okay, this person has very long legs. Okay, let's do this to kind of balance it out so it doesn't look a little awkward. And also, of course, suit to the character. Like, oh, this person doesn't wear something like this for doing XYZ stuff.
mm,
I recently have worked on a production of Tick Tick Boom in Theater Horizon. It's
mm-hmm.
closing actually tomorrow. Well, the tomorrow of the day we're recording. But one of these like really quirky characters that we were like, okay, so we don't really have time to do a complete costume change. Person, this actor is playing multiple roles, literally back to back to back, and it's just she's amazing. And so, what are the things that she can just pop it on to her base costume and completely change the look? Initially, we just had like a cat eye glass, and the way she is portraying this character is like little older. She's done a lot of things in New York. She's like an agent in New York. Um, so it's just like, okay, so I pulled a couple of the options. I have like a very basic navy trench coat, so she can cover up the entire thing. I have this black and white kind of tweedy, oversized vest. This feels like
Mm,
a little older. Maybe she is this like, I don't know, lesbian person. I don't want to say like a D word here. The lesbian person who has been in New York all her life. She is kind of gritty. And then I had this oriental like robe, short sleeve that is just more exotic.
mm,
And as soon as she came out with that last orientalist robe, we were like, found her. That's her.
mm,
Yeah. So I love those moments of just like we can find the character
mm.
just by adding those little bit of costume pieces. And just like, oh yeah, we know this person. We know exactly who this person is.
I love
So
it.
yeah.
Yeah, like so what I'm hearing is first of all, I love hearing about like some of the little things that you do that almost sound like Asaki signatures, right? Like little playful moments that are kind of like conversation starters and in a way kind of connect the dots between like productions, right? But yeah, I'm excited to see some of your work actually come to life.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully after this they can like share more of the links of some examples of your work as well as
Sure.
out. But yeah, like I love the idea of what I'm hearing too is like a lot of the intentionality around the way that you go that you think about each one of these pieces and tying them into the person, but then also the characters. And I'm assuming that like in a personal day to day, right? Like everybody's a character, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes our moods kind of reflect, our character of the day, so to speak. So it sounds like a lot of fun, especially to be able to take that and translate that into work. I like working a lot with like youth and young women that are looking for, how to break into careers, especially in the creative world. So I think that it's so powerful for you to be able to share your story about how something that was just so intuitive and innate has literally, in a very fun way, created all these opportunities for you. I love that. Love that. Love that. Love that. Okay, so let's just keep it moving here. So. I hear that you're also a cultural consultant.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I absolutely was fascinated when I read that. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about what exactly is a cultural consultant, and what does that look like? What is your day to day? What's your process in that? How did you turn that into, a form of a career?
So it hasn't really blowing up as a career move just yet, because it just doesn't have that much of a need just yet.
Mm,
But it kind of started with so I'm, like I said, I'm from Japan. I grew up in there. I love Japanese cultures and I love history. So
mm,
knowing a lot of it, and I came here, people are not able to distinguish what's the difference between Japanese cultures
mm,
and what other Asian cultures surroundings. Like, so sometimes I see like, well, that looks very Chinese. That looks very
mhm,
Korean. That doesn't look like authentic Japanese. Is one thing, and another thing is like, oh, just kimono, right? I was like, well, 12th century kimono look completely different from
mhm,
17th century kimono. Same
mhm,
thing with the hairstyle. It was just like you cannot just blanket state and say this is what you should look like. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. So, um, I am trying to doing providing like a dramaturgical, like, okay, so historically this is where we are and this is how they should dress like,
mhm,
even though I might not be actually doing the costume design. So like this is like a visual information point. Another is Japanese language is also, people seem to love that. I don't
mm,
understand, but okay, sure. Like especially like anime and manga is so popular nowadays among the younger generations and even older generations, and people try to like incorporate that to their arts, which is totally cool,
mm,
but sometimes they use it in a way that it's like, well, it doesn't make sense, or like, the way you were saying is very offensive or wrong. So whenever um they are trying to do a theatrical production around my culture, I'm like, okay, so here's the information. um I hope you understand where all these things laid out so you can represent my culture correctly on stage, because I'm not the only one who's going to be offended or being sad for seeing something misrepresented on stage. There's going to be other people who'll be like, that would be
mm,
very wrong. And it came, it started with seeing my culture and other Eastern Asian culture being so misrepresented and appropriated for
mm,
generations after generations in the mass media. So it's
mm,
just like, all right, at least within the control of this little community that I
mm,
have, at least I can correct that. That's like the desire, how I
mm,
like start claiming myself. I am a cultural consultant. If you need to hire me, contact me. Um, and also, hopefully, in the future, I can connect to other communities in other cities, because this work, I don't really have to travel to other cities, so I can stay in Philadelphia and
mhm,
do the work and keep on informing people like, okay, this is what it is. Yeah, please represent us in a right way and don't just disfigure it, because it's such a beautiful, long history, very unique culture
mm,
that I love and I grew up with. So yeah, I don't know if it just made any sense, but
Oh no, I totally get it. And in my head, it kind of goes into a couple of different areas because of course, like being in LA and just thinking about all like actually like the work seems incredibly relevant. I'm one of these people that absolutely loves period pieces, like series. I'm obsessed with them, right? So those are, I think, like environments where having a well-informed cultural consultant are so important. And I think that there's also that um, there's that fine line between inspiration and representation, right? And then, I think that sometimes like that's where like in that blurred line is where sometimes things go wrong, right? Like where someone is inspired by something, and with all their passion, with all their good intentions, probably they end up taking something and maybe don't really understand how their adaptation of it might potentially be, unfortunately misinterpreted or come across as like some level of, not respecting like the true culture, right? And I think that there's also where we start to see, especially in today's world, where it's such, globalization is just here, right? And so I think there's so much, fusion, right? And fusion happens in so many ways. Like fusion happens. How many fusion restaurants have you been to, right? Where it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and sometimes we love it, and sometimes we're like, meh, that doesn't quite work. Like it always works with food, right? Like let's face it, like everything always works with food. But again, like depending on how else the artwork can get used, I think that that's where things kind of go awry, especially like sometimes I think about, for example, brands that might be leveraging something that seems like a cultural inspiration, but like once it hits the market, like members of that community are like, did you consult anybody? Like that feels more like appropriation versus inspiration, right? So for me, like, Asaki, if you were here, I would say like we need to go and have a bite and have like a much deeper conversation, because it does seem like there's so many different avenues to go down. I'm even thinking about like some of like the recent, actually like right now, me and my husband, he just got back. We're watching the last Avatar, right? And so I'm just, so again, like that's a good example of it's this fantasy world, so to speak, right? But obviously has a lot of its roots and inspiration coming from Asian cultures, right? And so as I'm watching these characters, there's like this thin line where I'm like, is this inspiration? Like what exactly is inspiring this? Who exactly is this representing? But anyway, so, and especially I think when you get into some areas of sci-fi, again, that's where you see a lot of things that, start as inspiration. But again, it can go in so many ways. So I find your work absolutely fascinating. I'd love to see more of it. So it seems like costume design is a really big focal point. And again, you're a multidisciplinary artist, but like, and I feel like you've done a little bit of that already for us today in terms of like walking us through your inspiration and your process. Can you tell us a little bit more about maybe like another production that you've done and how you kind of walked through your costume design? Like, so I think you told us about one character. Is another character that you can maybe tell us about that? Do you ever do any kind of, do you always like stay very close to your Japanese roots when you're developing these characters, or is there maybe, okay, so let's take it that way, right? So tell me about a moment where you were doing costume design that was, similarly, like probably like tapping into other cultures and tying them into those characters, but actually, or maybe not, like tell us a little bit more about costume design like that maybe spears from something entirely separate of your culture.
Sure. For some reason, I have done so many Shakespeare plays. For some reason, people love to give me Shakespeare plays, and I love Shakespeare, so I don't mind. I actually love it. I actually this week opened a production of the Spanish tragedy at the Villanova University, which is I went to master's in theater for. So they know me, and they were like, "Oh, Asaki can deal with this massive, bloody." It's very bloody. It's one of the revenge plays that, for those who knows Hamlet, that it's kind of close to Hamlet. It's like the guy is trying to avenge for whatever that death that happened to his family. So the story surrounds Spain and Portugal around 16th century. And when me and the directors, they had a co-direct, two professor co-directors, were talking about like what kind of style we should go to. Doing 100% pure accurate is not going to be too exciting anymore, unfortunately, because we have seen so many of those Shakespearean costumes on TV, and of course they have millions of dollars in budget and they can do it gorgeously. We don't have that budget, so how can we do it still exciting and appealing to the modern eye, and also can help audience to understand the storytelling, because those Shakespearean texts is confusing. All those, the way they talk and like all those people going in and out playing different characters, like, wait, who are you now, who is your affiliation, or like what is the relationship with this family or this court or a country, whatever. So I can definitely link some of the images later, but basically we said, okay, it's going to be an eclectic look, a little bit like have a flavor of the period, but the queen and the romantic interest, like ingenue of the production, they have jumpsuits with the skirt attached or like a little overdress to it, and they can take it off to look more like a modern woman. All the men have like a really nice suit with a lot of trims going on. Spain's color is electric blue and gold. Portuguese is going to be green and silver, so it's visually understandable for the audience. It's like, oh, he is, Spanish prince. Oh, she is ambassador from Portuguese. So at least you can track who's who. And the people who wear black is dead. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing I tend to do for Shakespearean stuff. And I try to help the audience understand what is going on, who they are, as much as possible. What else do I do? Like I do anything. It's actually really rare that I get to do anything Japanese or Asian related, only maybe like a handful of times. Earlier in this year, I did a production of the Lehman trilogy, which was 3 brothers, immigrants from Bavaria, Germany, back in like a mid-19th century, became this huge financial corporate of the Lehman Brothers that collapsed back in 2008. Do you remember the market crash in 2008?
Oh, yeah, I think
that's the people. That's the people. So it's like their origin story and how they got to the big corporation that eventually crashed in 2008. There were only 3 guys, and they're literally on stage pretty much the entire time. 3 acts, 3 hours. It's so long. Original production, they were wearing like basically how can I say it? It's like a suit, but more like a 19th century suit, like a frock coat. The entire time. They didn't change anything. Then they put like hats and veils and stuff like that to change between the characters. And we were like, well, let's change it up a little bit because it's going to be visually very boring if we do that. So we started off with that kind of a period frock coat, and as the generation goes, that their cut become more and more contemporary. In the end, they were like in their dress shirts and dress pants, and that's it. And that's when the market crashed. And in the end, they put on their original costume to kind of remember how they started it. So that's very Western, and also I have nothing to do with that Jewish culture or German culture, so it's just like nothing to do with my personal roots. But what the story needed it and what this particular production needed it is what I provided. And I think it was pretty successful. From what I heard from the audience, like, oh yeah, you made it really, the costume made it really clear, like, who are these people? Because story passed so fast, and there are so many characters that people get really confused. Like, wait, who is this person who is talking right now? So yeah, that's like other non-Japanese or Asian thing I can do.
I think it's really powerful to hear it, again, like just like the intentionalness and like the way that you really work with the directors of these productions to help really bring the stories to life for the audience and simplify the things that, like, to your point, right, like that they may not be able to overstate, so to speak. They may have to, like, dealing with like the constraints of the staging of a theater versus, like you said, like Hollywood, for example, where you've got CGI, you've got bigger budget, you've got like, crazy sets that you can work with. And again, like things that are shot over days versus something that's literally happening all within the time frame of, 1 to 3 hours, right? Like that's tough to work with. You don't really have, that much time to do all the costume changes, but to still make those changes impactful. And kind of to your point, I would imagine too that your experience and your inspiration of having seen people potentially misrepresenting or misusing influences of your culture in their productions as well. I imagine that also helps inform your approach when you're working with other cultures and the way that you research those cultures as well to represent them. And again, like having that sensitivity. So like when you're going through your process, do you also like kind of like tap in with folks from those cultures, like, hey, listen, like I've got this idea, and again, you're already looking at it from the perspective of, I'm looking at history for inspiration and reference. I'm looking to the culture for authenticity, but at the same time, there's a level of a need to make things interesting for modern audiences and bringing in some of those like contemporary influences and contemporary, trends, we'll say, right? So whether that's like the way that the makeup looks or the way that the hair goes, or like more modern silhouettes, et cetera. It's like, so do you ever tap in with other folks to say like, hey, like I've got this idea. Is this in the safe zone, or is this like potentially going to be like, oh,
Yeah, 100%. Actually, that's a great segue to introduce what Parachute is doing this spring, the production called Siluetas. It's a brand new musical. Erlina Ortiz, who is Parachute through and through, and Robbie Hager has been working on for years now. The two main characters, one of them, she is Cuban. She has been living in the States for, I believe, 15 years. So she's Americanized. She kind of cut roots from Cuba, and she just doesn't really have the connection anymore. And the other character, she is an international student from Syria. And she loves Syria. She does this kind of on-street activism performance thing called, she's an artist, performance thing called Ask a Muslim. And she just like, yeah, ask a Muslim. If you have burning questions about my religion, my culture, like ask away and you're going to get a donut, which is like really, really charming. She has like a whole song about it. But because, again, I am not from Syria. I actually never been to Middle East. So we actually have a cultural consultant for Syria. His name is Fuad, a very, very soulful, wonderful person. We are so lucky to have him. I had a couple ideas for her Ask a Muslim costume that she says in the lines like, oh yeah, I'm just a character. This is just my performance, so I don't feel, threatened or unsafe doing this on the street, even though people sometimes says very aggressive things like, "Oh, you all look like terrorists." Like, whatever you're wearing hijab. Like, how can you tell you are friendly or not friendly? But anywho, I had a couple ideas, and I picked some stuff that is pleasing to my eye and pleasing to my taste, and feels like that is equivalent to what people in Syria would wear.
Hmm.
And I was like, hey, Juan, so I have these ideas. What do you think? And he got back to me. I was like, oh, the thing you presented actually not really from Syria.
Hmm.
Here's the links to the things that is actually more appropriate. I was like, thank you so much. That's the thing I needed.
Hmm.
So yeah, I switched what that performance would look like. And I mean, like, how would I know? Like, I would never know more than Hua does because he's from there. He is in the culture. So yeah, definitely tap into the people from those culture who knows the culture and understand how they work is definitely the biggest resources for these kind of examples. Yeah.
It sounds like incredibly interesting work, and every production gives you a reason to connect and learn about, a different time, a different era, and
Yeah.
a different community, which I absolutely love. So, of all the productions that you've done, they all sound like they've been fascinating. Is there any one of them that for you has kind of maybe been distinctly unique, or specifically your favorite? Or one of your top ones. I mean, like I know that with all of my work, it's practically like I'm really bad at picking favorites. But again, like, if there's one of your productions that, for you is like an Asaki signature, right? Is there one of them that maybe comes to mind?
Well, like you said, it's so hard because every single production I pour my soul
Mm.
into it.
Or the one that's right in front of you in the moment, right? Like the
Yeah, I
latest
was like,
one.
I can't pick a baby. Actually, I'm gonna pick two babies. I'm sorry.
All right, hey, no problem.
One of them is a production of me, Lady Murasaki, and book signing. I'm sorry, I'm like butchering the actual title. It's a short play written by Japanese American playwright Julia Izumi. She is based in New York. It's a very small play, and it was supposed to be a bookshop owner is interviewing Lady Murasaki, who is supposedly wrote the first novel in the history, and she is a female author back in 11th century Japan, called The Tale of Genji. I don't know how, if you're familiar with that, or if any of the audience is familiar with that. It's very, very long. I tried to read it, I couldn't get through. I was just like, this is really boring. But anywho, so the bookshop owner is interviewing Lady Murasaki. It's like, oh, where do your inspiration came from? Are those characters like based on the real story? And the person who claimed to be Lady Murasaki just like kind of swerve around the questions, and turned out she forgot her past. That she doesn't remember she was Lady Murasaki, except the fact that she was Lady Murasaki, because it has been centuries and hundreds of years has passed. So it's a really charming play. And of course, I had to dress Lady Murasaki that, yeah, what would she wear if she was a modern girl? That was like a fun thing to think about. And at the end, spoiler alert, a person who she wrote as like not ideal man, but like the main character in the Tale of Genji appears in the 11th century garment. Now, if we try to make that thing, that's gonna be way beyond the budget that we had, and we can't even rent it because it's so specific that you have to probably go to Japan and get the measurements and blah blah blah. It's just like we don't have that kind of budget or time. So what I did was got the pattern. Yay, internet! Thank God.
Imagine your job before the internet.
I know.
By itself.
And because it's so large, I was like, all right, instead of using regular fabric, what if I use a mulberry paper, which is like kind of Japanese or South Korean or Korean, I should say, paper, make it, put it an adhesive lining so it wouldn't tear. It would act like a fabric, and sew them together to make this kimono. It was finicky. Yeah, it was very finicky, but it worked out and people loved it. Because the reason why was because the budgetary and time issue, but also because she's an author who wrote on the paper. So I just wanted to utilize that inspiration, and also because it's paper, it makes the papery sound as soon as he started moving and dancing. And I thought it would be really, really cool to have that. Oh,
That
so
sounds amazing. Again, like that just sounds like such an intentional signature there of just really like blending the character into the costume in a really innovative and fun way. Like people never, the audiences never really think about the budget. That's kind of one of those like, production folks, like, things that just make us feel good when we figure out how to find a clever solution for a critical challenge and somehow have it really enhance the character and enhance the production in some way. That is fascinating. Okay, so that was baby number one. What is creative baby favorite number two?
Baby number two is a production of Pericles that I did with Shakespeare and Clark Park back in 2021. It's like the first production I worked coming out of COVID. So Shakespeare and Clark Park does summer outside Shakespeare production in the middle of this park. I started my design career as a designer for outside Shakespeare tour. So I just like, not for this company, different company. So it has like a special place in my heart all the time. This production was a play and some commedia dell'arte, which is like Italian theatrical form back in like 16th century with the mask and very like a clownish act, and also circus combined together. It was a very big production, but it was so much fun because I got to work with a good friend of mine from college, Carly, that we have been talking about this for like a very long time, and we got our like dream come true. The challenging part was some of the actors goes up on the silk. Do you know like there's like very tall iron, like a steel structure with long silk fabric, and they can like do amazing things around it. Yeah,
workout too, by the way, if anyone's curious. Like it's an insane workout to try to like work on the silks, but like
oh yeah, definitely. It's like immensely strong
body. Yeah.
So working with that and puppets, that's another thing, like gigantic puppets in the middle of the heat. So that was just like not only a challenge to work with these kind of media of like, all right, what can I do to make sure the people who goes up on the silk is safe and they can do whatever they want to without worrying about the like tearing or getting tangled up with the costume. Also the factor that they're outside in the middle of the summer in the heat and sometimes rain comes out. Yeah, it was definitely a challenge, but the team was amazing. And one time there was this storm scene when the actor was on top of the silk, and he was like saying his line. He was drowning. And then in West Philadelphia, there's a horse riders. There was a documentary about the West Philly horse riders. One of them was just like watching, just like, oh yeah, something is happening, just like that. Kind of surreal comparison. It was like here's this huge drama happening right here, and there's this guy on the horse just watching. Just like, okay, sounds like another day in Philly.
I love it. That sounds awesome. Well, I'm hoping to get to see some of the, the reels or the photos or any videos of those productions. I hope that we can have those added to the link as well. It sounds really fascinating. So you mentioned a production that sounds like it's in progress right now with Power Street Radio. But yeah, we would love to maybe make sure that our audiences get to hear about what are you working on right now, what's coming up, where can they find some of your work, actually, available for them to come in and check out right now?
Sure, they should definitely come check out Siluetas because it's happening in June at Tomlinson Theater in Temple University, which feels like a homecoming to me and other folks like Gabby and Erlina in Power Street team, because we all went to temple and we all were told, oh, you should go to where your people are at in order to be successful. Which we were like, excuse you? And we stuck around and we made our own community. We made our own work, so we didn't have to go anywhere, which is great. Sorry, my cat is demanding love right now.
I support, paying attention to all kitty overlords. I have a puppy overlord. I had to close the door so that she wouldn't come in, but otherwise making her little appearances too. So, but she's a fan as well. I don't blame her. So you've got that June production. And one of my favorite questions to ask, actually, there's 2 more questions that I want to ask. When do you feel most powerful?
That's a good question. So when I go see the play, and of course people have no clue, the audience have no clue I'm the one who designed all the costume. And when they were like, ooh, or ah, it's just like, I know, I did that.
Like if you could bottle that sound, you could bottle those faces. So my guess is that when you're at opening night, everyone's watching the production and your eyes are going back and forth between like watching the production, like seeing it in that moment. But a lot of it is probably also just watching the audience and watching.
Yeah. There was like one show that I did a couple of years ago. One of the actors came out with her second dress, which is like big poofy. It's like very dramatic statement piece, and a lot of the audience is just like, "Oh yeah," and I was like, "I succeed. That feels really, really good."
Oh, I love that. That does sound delicious. Oh, my goodness. Like, we could just like bottle that moment for yourself to keep that. Where's that app, right? So, and so my last question for you, Asaki, is, when you look back on your life in the future, what do you hope your legacy will be? Like your legacy as a human being, your legacy as a creative professional, your legacy as an artist. And again, answer all 3, answer whichever one. And I'm sorry, I have to ask.
Come here.
Artist is kitty artist here.
That's a good question. I would say, as a person who involved with this business in being in theater, it doesn't have to be specifically because of my costume, but for the show I got involved with, people get inspired or encouraged or be able to in touch with themselves, to be vulnerable because of the work we do. That's like, and it doesn't have to, I don't have to know what kind of power we were able to give them or what kind of effect we were able to, make for these people. So that would be my present and future as an artist. I am also an educator because I work in university. I have students who are interested in costume or working in the backstage, which is sometimes very unsung work that because people don't see you, people just assume that you don't exist. Like, well, we exist. So for those students, they are able to thrive and love what they do and able to learn the valuable lesson being in arts and creativity, whether they stay in this area or not. Like, oh, because I have done this, I know how to communicate with these very difficult people. Or because I was able to do this, I know how to solve problem. So that's what I'm trying to nurture within them. Just like, I don't care if you're gonna be a theater maker, just learn what you can while you're doing this and have fun and just be an awesome human being just because you're in a theater.
I love it. That is beautiful. So like if I can summarize it, I feel like your legacy is in enjoying the moment of being an artist and the experience of knowing that your work, regardless of what part of the production it touches, that it moved and inspired somebody in a way that feels intangible, and creates like a ripple in their life in some way. And yeah, like, just to recognize that a lot of what we put into the work ultimately, hopefully that brings us like a sense of fulfillment and learning and growth in our own way. I love it, Asaki. Well, thank you so much for taking time with me today. I am very much looking forward to seeing whatever I can, because like, being out here in LA, I'm like, I got to get to Philly. I have to see some. So we'll see if there's any way that I can come out in June to check out your production. I would absolutely love to do that and to be able to meet you in person. So thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having this time with me, She-Roze.